Why the mayor is not here? Where's our state rep? Where's our congressman?
This is what democracy looks like.
Today is an act of resistance.
We are the majority.
It is a serious problem when we have members of our military denigrating female Marines who will give their life to this country.
I am surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate.
It's perfectly in line with what he said he would do as a candidate, which is ban and target Muslims and new immigrants to this country.
This isn't about being politically correct. This is about saving our children.
Hello. I am Rashida Jones. I'm thrilled to be here today and share the stage with these three powerhouses who just happen to be women. And I just want to jump right into it. So the past 3 days, you guys have been listening to some amazing women talk about what it's like to be here in a particularly harrowing time for not just the United States, but the world. And the three of you have been on the front lines of speaking out and organizing, and I just want to hear from your perspective, what the hell is going on in this country right now? Let's start with Tamika.
Well, thank you very much, Tina, and everyone who is responsible for me being here and participating in this great conference, and to all of you who are here. You know, I could talk about all the problems, but I'll start off by saying that one of the things that's happening in America right now is that women are badass and we're not having it, right?
Right. Yeah.
We really have decided that we are going to be the ones to take this country in the right direction. And with all the things that we see that are terrible, that really hurt, it is so wonderful to see women be empowered to stand up and to speak out. Thousands of women have decided that they want to run for office after attending the Women's March on Washington. And that's the type of power that we possess.
That's great, yeah. Linda, what the hell's going on?
Fascism.
Right.
I really want people to understand that we are in a very serious moment. This is not any other time in recent history that you can point to. It's a dangerous time, and I'm proud to be in a movement with women who are unapologetic. We are strong, we are logical and rational, we are inclusive, we are intersectional, and we are already starting to win. It may not feel like we're winning yet, but we've already had a lot of wins, so I'm very proud of being in a movement that's also centering the most marginalized people, including also being led by women of color.
Right. I mean, this is a time of testing, and it is bringing us out to resist. Becca, how has that affected your work?
I mean, I think we are winning. I mean, I think on the Muslim ban, at least, we're winning. I think that a couple of courts have said we're winning. I think that thousands of people who can still enter this country have said that we're winning. I think that the tens of thousands of Americans who showed up to protest at airports have said we're winning. And you know, to paraphrase Dr. Sparrow from the opening night of this, I think what's happening in this country right now is that people are starting to give a shit.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Good way to put it.
So the Women's March was deemed the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. One of the things that was, yeah, please, that's huge. That's clap-worthy. And one of the things that's significant about the organization is that 3 out of the 4 co-chairs are women of color. And I just want to talk to you guys about why that's so important for the movement. Tamika.
Well, you know, I've been telling people that there's one thing to study things that are happening in the world, and it's another thing to actually go to the people who it's happened to and have them to be a part of the conversation. And I think that what made the Women's March great was that we did center the voices of the most marginalized communities. We did not in any way try to say that we represented all voices. We ensured that everyone was at the table. And if it were not for us being involved, the idea that people would look at reproductive rights, not just for abortion and birth birth control, but also look at the idea that there are some women of color who live in certain communities that don't even want to have children because they're afraid for their children's safety. And the only way that that would happen, that those conversations would happen, is if you put those of us who come from those experiences in a position to be able to lead the charge. And I think that's why it was so great and why it was so intersectional and why so many people felt like it was a place for them to come to.
Where they could be represented.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. Were you surprised, Tamika, about how quickly people mobilized? I mean, it really came together so fast.
Well, you know, I'm often asked this question, how did I feel? And was it, you know, was there great pride? And of course there was. I felt that it was amazing. We had been through so much putting it together, a lot of pain, and Linda will tell you about what we went through. But I did stand on that stage looking at so many people pouring into DC and feel a little sad. Because for some of the folks who showed up, their activism or their moment of awakening started with Donald Trump and sort of ends there. Where people who have been oppressed in America feel like Donald Trump is just an extension of what has been happening in this nation for a long time.
Right. So to that point, Linda, is your experience of how people have been mobilized and how quickly they've been mobilized, does it feel gratifying in some way based on how you start and what brought you into organizing?
I'm an activist that was born in the ashes of 9/11 as an American Muslim living here in New York City, and I saw grown men in my community dragged out of coffee shops, businesses raided, people picked up from their homes. And as an Arab American Muslim, you know, my community suffered in silence for 15 years in a post 9/11 America, and watched family members across the world in places like Iraq massacred with our taxpayer dollars. So while I do see, and I'm gratified by the kind of awakening, as Tamika calls it, of people coming to the movement, watching people stand up, you know, against the Muslim ban, watching people at the airports, I want people to know that there are people in this country who have seen things like Guantanamo North in Indiana. I want people to know that communities in this country are under unwarranted surveillance, that men in our community and women in our community have been deported back to their countries and separated from their families. So we come from a lot of pain and trauma. And when we think about Donald Trump, people may think they saw the worst of it, but we actually feel like the worst of it is yet to come.
Right.
So we come from these communities where we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot, so we don't even know what this administration is capable of. But I'm gratified, and what I said at the Women's March is I said, I welcome you to the movement right now, but don't leave us. Don't leave us when that anxiety goes away. Right. Don't leave us when you're not feeling afraid anymore. Understand that there are some of us who are in perpetual fear, in perpetual outrage, and I hope that you stay in the movement with us.
Well, I think it does in some way take a personal connection. When you feel like something is being violated or taken away from you, that's what brings you to something, and it is about staying. Becca, all three of you have very personal stories about how you started your work, but what got you into the kind of law you're into?
You know, I think I grew up as sort of like an overprivileged white person in this country. Luckily, I grew up in the Bay Area, so people around me were kind of woke early. I pretty literally stumbled into the refugee crisis. In the summer of 2008, I was doing an internship in the Middle East. I was still a student in law school, and I kept hearing about all of these Iraqi refugees in Jordan and felt like, as an American, I had some kind of obligation to understand the fallout of my own country's foreign policy. So I got this, in retrospect, crazy idea, which is how most ideas start, I think, to just go to Jordan and try to talk to refugees. And everyone was in really difficult circumstances. You know, people don't have housing, women are still being trafficked, gay people are still being persecuted, but everybody thought that they were on some kind of wait list, and if they could just hang in there long enough, eventually, like, the US would call, or Prime Minister Trudeau would call and say, you know, get on a plane, like, welcome. I don't know where that's gone, but, and so at the end of the week, you know, I figured at the very least I could try to tell people how long the wait list is and say, if you can just hang in there 6 months, 12 months, a year and a half, you know, you can restart your life. And I finagled a meeting with the US Embassy under terms that we won't talk about. And I said, you know, tell me about this refugee thing you guys have going on. You know, and one of the questions I asked was, how long is the wait list? And they said, what wait list? And I think that, you know, apart from just being a really powerful metaphor, I don't think that the wait list is like a nefariously propagated rumor by the US government to placate refugees. I just think that if you live deep at the bottom of a dark hole, you need something at the top that looks like it's lighting your way out. And the fact that the best that this community could come up with was a wait list, I just thought was tragic. And I thought that we could do something about it.
Right. Wow. So the thing that kind of brought you to kind of national attention was when Trump signed the executive order banning people from getting visas from Muslim countries. You took to the airport.
We took to the sky.
You took to the sky. You
Yeah.
took to the friendly skies.
Yeah.
And was that like an impulse? Did you just decide, I got to get to the airport now?
Yeah, I just woke up, I was like super itchy to like wait in a TSA line. No, I'm making light of a terrible subject. That's how we all get up in the morning, I think.
You gotta laugh.
No, Trump gets sworn in on a Friday. I actually took that day off because I felt like I was going to need sleep for what was to come. And then everyone was wondering, which of these great policies that we've been promised is going to come first. And on Monday, it became clear that it was going to be the Muslim ban. So my organization, the International Refugee Assistance Project, represents tens of thousands of refugees, mostly from the Middle East and North Africa, fleeing for their lives. So we called Monday and Tuesday everyone who had a valid visa and said, get on a plane. Get on a plane right now. Take the loss on selling your house, get your kids and get on a plane. And then realize that depending on when the order got signed, not just our clients, but thousands of people were literally going to lose their visa or their immigration status like in midair. Like at whatever point he signs it, tens of thousands of people are going to be over the Pacific or over the Atlantic, and they're suddenly become inadmissible, and no one knows what's going to happen to them. So we put out a call and we said, this might sound funny, but people are going to need lawyers. Go to the airport, and sure enough, everyone landed and immediately got detained. They tried to turn airports into black sites. People weren't allowed access to their family members, and so we brought a lawsuit, and 27 hours after the executive order was signed, we won an order saying that everyone had to be released and that the order couldn't be enforced.
That's what happens when you resist. So Donald Trump has said that Syrian refugees are not our problem, and that Syria is not our problem. And in light of the events of this week, do you think that Syrian refugees are going to be our problem now?
Yeah, they're our problem now. They're his problem now. I mean, I think, he goes from saying that, Syrian refugees are trying to come in as terrorists to saying like, oh, they're all God's children, and I was crying over what happened. And, to my mind, all that happened was that like 3 days ago, 200 people got gassed, and then yesterday we launched 59 Tomahawk missiles at them. So I think that if we're going to continue our military posture in Syria, we have to couple that with acknowledging that we have a responsibility also for the refugee crisis.
Absolutely. Tamika, tell us quickly a little bit about how you started your work, your personal story got you organizing.
So my parents were always involved in activism. They still are right now. But I think it became sort of my own movement when my son's father was murdered. My son is now 18 years old. He's on his way to college. And when he was 2, his father was shot and killed and left in a ditch for 2 weeks before his body was discovered. Once we received his remains, he was fully decomposed, and we were never able to really put him to rest properly. It was kind of embarrassing to try to tell that story, right? I came from a very upstanding family, and to try to explain that he had been involved in illegal activity and got killed, it was really difficult. But, at some point I began to ask the question, why? Why was he even in the situation that he was in? And why did I have to join a club of so many other young black women who had lost their children's father to the same fate, to gun violence or some other type of violence? And when I started pulling back those layers and looking at how his drug-addicted mom and the poverty from which he came from, and all the issues, the fact that he had not been properly educated, and also looking at the idea that the shooter is just as much of a victim, the person who killed him. And we don't always want to accept that, but that is the reality of what is happening in communities, marginalized communities every day. And when I began to look at those issues, I realized that just focusing on the gun as a part of the conversation was a waste of time. I had to really look into the systemic issues that he was facing that would even put him in that situation at that time. And that's when I think I became my own activist, not just my parents' child who was an activist.
And do you feel like the people that you've met through the march and the movement, is there a feeling that these systemic issues, which have existed in our country for a really long time, that it's new to a lot of people?
Yeah, there were a lot of people who were saying they have no idea what we're talking about. They don't understand what white privilege is and why we even need to bring that up. They really just didn't understand. And I think now people are beginning to sort of have the curtains open and they are beginning to see. What I am afraid of, however, is, as Linda said, don't leave us, right? The idea that, you know, once you get equal pay, which means a white woman making as much as a white man, you would not be concerned about the fact that women of color are not even on the level of white women.
Right.
You know, being authentic in this struggle, is to be concerned with those people who may not be able to make it in this room today. And we are hoping that when folks come and say, how do I become an activist? How do I get involved? That they will first be most concerned with learning from and listening to the voices of those people who've actually been through the struggles. It's not enough to study it and think you know it. You have to actually allow the people who've experienced it to speak first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, obviously, people not understanding their white privilege, that's the privilege.
Right.
You don't have to understand it.
Exactly.
And on that subject, you know, I think we kind of all know the statistic that 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. And that's huge. Right. That's kind of shocking.
You know, and I often have this conversation with people. They say, well, what am I supposed to say? It's such a difficult conversation because I asked the question, on Labor Day before the election, what was the conversation that you were having with your mom, your aunts, sisters, and others about the election? Because black women, regardless of whether we liked Hillary Clinton or not, whatever those issues may have been, we understood what we had to go and do. So on Labor Day, we were in the kitchen cooking, saying, you straight, right? You got your ID and everything that you need, you know? And if I have to have a conversation with my son, who, by the way, thinks that I'm the only thing between him and fun, but, you know, but that's another day.
He's 18.
A different panel. But anyway, if I have to have a conversation with him every time he leaves the house, that, listen, if you are approached by a police officer, keep your hands up, keep your head down, say yes, sir. If you're approached by another person in a community who may want to harm you, these are the things that you need to do as a survival method. Even if you are in the right, you still need to bow down in that moment so that you can come home alive. You damn sure can have a conversation with your mother about who she's going to vote for.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So how do you, Linda, how do you have, I mean, this is an interesting subject to me because it does feel like a gap that we need to bridge. How do you talk to somebody, how do you make somebody see the privilege that they don't see?
I think oftentimes the privilege is of not having to even interact with anyone that is not like you. I mean, I've been to parts of the country in places like Nebraska and Idaho, and they literally will sit and have a conversation with me and say, I've never sat and spoken to a Muslim before. I've seen them, but I've never spoken to them before. And I think in this moment that we're in right now, we have to challenge each other and have these difficult conversations. People challenged us at the Women's March, and they said that, you know, I see a lot of tension on the Facebook page, and I told the lady from the New York Times, I said, this is not by accident, this is by design. The reason why we're in the situation that we are in is because we don't want to talk about race, we don't want to talk about class, we don't want to talk about exclusivity within the feminist movement, not looking at someone like me and saying, that doesn't look like a feminist to me. You know, that modest woman, that's not feminism. So I think we need to challenge each other and understanding that in this movement, we're not all going to agree. There are 340 million Americans and we have 340 million opinions about 340 million things. But as long as we can agree that we have a misogynist, sexist, Islamophobic, white supremacist regime in the White House, I think we can all work together.
Yeah. Yes. And I
Is that
think
the conversation that happened in your kitchen on Labor Day?
Right.
Y'all don't even want to know what I've been saying in my house.
it does feel as time goes on. I mean, it's so shocking to think it's only been 2.5 months, and we have a lot more time to endure. And as time goes on, it's possible that many more people will be affected by their rights being taken away from them. And I think it does take that kind of that visceral feeling of that to bring you to resistance. So we talked about how to include more women in this movement. Becca, I want to ask you about the law and how being a lawyer in this field has changed in the past year, even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to also remember all the underprivileged lawyers as we're having this conversation. No, that was a joke.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Well, you know.
No, I mean, I think, so I sat on the stage last year on a panel about refugees, and Tina was moderating, and she said, you know, what do you think we should do? And I said, well, I'm a lawyer, so I think we should sue. And everyone laughed, and it's not that funny anymore, really. I think that, hooray, nothing's funny anymore. You know, I think that within the branches of government, so as opposed to sort of like people's-led movements, I think the judiciary is really like the last bulwark between us and just, all the things that you said were occupying the White House, frankly. And I think the judges know that, and I think they're scared shitless. And so I think that now is a uniquely good time to use the power of the courts and the power of lawsuits and litigation to challenge unchecked executive power. I think it's not a coincidence that the first judge who issued, a far-reaching order against the Muslim ban was sort of a self-described moderate conservative Bush appointee who, like the rest of us, was like, oh my God, what is happening to this country? Like, I have to stop it. I think, thanks to the movement for letting lawyers in, we're super happy to be here. And if you want to litigate, you have my number.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, it does feel like we kind of have to strategize based on what we are, which is a democratic capitalism. And one way is to exploit and remember the law, and another way is to really exercise our power with dollars and with just our presence in the market. So, Tamika and Linda, you organized a Day Without Women, and you were arrested protesting. Tell me a little bit about that movement and what happened that day.
You can go right on ahead, Linda.
It was another introduction to new activists in the movement about what does it mean for us to strike as women? What does it mean for us to reaffirm our economic power? We are one of the strongest and most influential groups of consumers in this country, and we have to start learning on how to leverage that. And A Day Without a Woman was an introduction to that. And we asked people to do a few things. Don't shop, if you have to shop, go to a women-owned, a minority-owned business. We asked you not to go to school or go to work if you can. And we told you to wear red in solidarity if you really couldn't participate in any of those. And we went and we were in 59th Street, Fifth Avenue, not too far from here, had a march. Or we didn't actually tell the NYPD we were marching. That was the problem.
Right.
And then we started marching, and then we got arrested.
It's called resistance.
It's called resistance. It's called not letting everybody know everything that you're about to do.
Because you can't ask the government to protest.
Yeah.
Like, really, just do your thing. Sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were arrested because we participated in civil disobedience. And there were some folks who were with us who've never been arrested before. They were Women's March organizers, and we spent almost 9 hours. The last person got out 9 hours later. And it is what it is. For everyone doesn't feel like that's their thing, right? So everyone is not going to be an activist in the same way. What I often tell people is that it's like a highway, right? And if everyone gets in their lane and they drive really, really well and keep that lane moving, we all make up the highway towards progress.
And I think also, people see organizers and activists and they say, I can't do that full time. Like, I don't have all that. Whatever you're doing, is great, but I just can't do it. And I always tell people, forget about us for a second. And I say there's really 4 quick things that you can do. In this time that we're in, if we're going to talk about loving and protecting one another, and especially the most marginalized, you got to know people to love and protect them. Like, get to know your neighbors. Do you know who lives down the hall from you? Do you know who works at the cubicle 6 cubicles down from you? That's important to me because I'm going to be more emboldened to protect somebody that I actually know. And the second thing I'll say to you is donate to organizations and people who are actually doing this work. Like, all these organizations at the front lines are under-resourced and need your support. $20 a month is not much, $5 a week just to support these organizations. Show up when you hear that there's an action or a vigil or there's some sort of, come stand in front of this senator's office because of Affordable Care Act or whatever. Don't say, who cares, it's only me, they won't miss me. Same thing if all the women who came to the Women's March all said, they won't miss me if I don't come, we wouldn't have had 1.2 million women in Washington, D.C. and 6 million all around the world who are marching. So show up, donate, build deep transformative relationships, because I truly believe when I think back as a Muslim to Japanese internment camps that I can't believe happened on the watch of the American people, I think to myself, if at that moment the American people had built deep transformative relationships with their Japanese American neighbors, there would never been not one Japanese American that would have been hauled off to an internment camp. So let's not do that again. Yeah. Let's say never again.
Yeah. And Becca, I mean, I think the fear is that we're going to normalize what's happening right now, and women are survivors, and we do have an adaptability. What can people do to not adapt, and what can they do to keep fighting?
I think that was a good overview of 4 things, and I'd add a 5th, which is don't let them distract you. This administration and these people are going to dangle shiny things in front of you. There's no Russia investigation. We're bombing Syria, right? There's no equal pay gap. I mean, crazy things are going to happen every day, and you have to keep remembering that they're crazy, and you can't forget about the crazy things that happened yesterday when the crazy thing happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not normal. This is not normal. This is not normal. Repeat after me. This is not normal.
All right. On that note, thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure to share the stage with you. Thanks, everybody.